I don't see it as a peacekeeping force. What it should more accurately be described as, not too certain at the moment, because again, we don't know the requirements, but it's certainly a deterrence force. It is not there to, in the traditional role of peacekeeping, being a neutral force to keep two warring parties at bay. And also, I mean, if it is a European contingent operation, then also they need to potentially switch to warfighting role almost immediately. If it actually does come down to Europe without the US, I mean, the EU can't do it just because this is a mission that far exceeds their capabilities. It can't be a NATO mission, designated NATO mission, because that would also entail Article 5, and the Russians would never agree to it. So what you're left with is a coalition of the willing, and the assumption is that there'll be no US boots on the ground. I think the key requirement then is to understand, well, would the US contribute enablers such as intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, air-to-air refueling, potentially enforcing a no-fly zone, those types of military tasks? Because if they are, then that's a big support to the Europeans. The big question is, well, who would lead this? And actually, I think this is why the UK position comes in, because I think it's less a question of should the UK deploy troops to Ukraine. It should be, do Europeans have to put troops into Ukraine? And if the question to that is yes, then the question to the UK is absolutely, because the UK is one of those only nations with experience of deploying a brigade and brigade plus levels since really the end of the Second World War. Obviously, we don't know the numbers required, but you've got to triple them because you have to keep that resource, and you need to have 6 months tours presumption, then 6 months in terms of your rest and recuperation, then 6 months training to go back again. So if it's a minimum brigade, that's actually a minimum of 15,000. That is 20% of the British Army just on that requirement. So it's going to be really difficult. And can the UK do it? I mean, they would really struggle without financial assistance in actually growing the size of the military. Or the British military cannot do anything else by what I mean is the British Army. So effectively, no other missions outside of Operation Kabrit in Estonia and Poland and Ukraine. They wouldn't be able to do it, no contingent operations, and even getting to the point where you actually might not be able to do ceremonial duties. And again, this is sort of the difficulties in terms of looking at the potential mission. I mean, it's by the definition of Article 5 and Article 6 in terms of what constitutes an armed act in the Washington Treaty, it looks like Article 5 wouldn't apply. Therefore, the issue for the Europeans is that, well, if you put European forces in Ukraine, what's to stop the Russians targeting them? Kill a platoon of 30 French troops, and then the Russians just say to the French, well, effectively, what are you going to do about it? And this is the difference between not just in terms of numbers of what the Americans provide, but also in that deterrence effect. I mean, ultimately, the tactical recognition flash, the badge on your shoulder matters massively in terms of deterrence. And then in terms of the equipment, again, this isn't a peacekeeping force that can go around on berets in soft-skinned vehicles, because ultimately, if a wider war was to begin between NATO and Russia, then it would become an active war zone, and the troops there would become immediately warfighting troops. So in that sense, I mean, whatever happens in Ukraine from a military mission, you can't really isolate from wider defense and deterrence within Europe. They're going to be intrinsically linked, not least the fact that from a European perspective, whatever forces that you put in to Ukraine will not be available for Baltic defense.